Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Kim?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? Pocket politics with Phill and Cam. Why? Why are we doing this?
I think it's gonna matter.
The only thing they want to talk about is guns and abortion.
My own views, I want to see the Republicans get away from the social issues.
I'm not saying that Republicans are idiots.
You hear something like that, it's powerful.
As an American, I was disgusted.
You could make the argument that you're probably more in the middle as well.
I think that's just a story that somebody's telling you.
Again, well, with the facts, this is true. Everybody knows
What
it.
facts?
So-
What facts? Who does this hurt more, Republicans or Democrats?
Boy, I've been thinking about that.
Welcome back to Pocket Politics. Cam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I just want to say to all of our listeners, happy Thanksgiving, even though we are a few days late.
Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully everybody had a good, enjoyable experience. Did you have a pretty good one?
Absolutely. Thanksgiving's one of my favorite holidays, so definitely a good Thanksgiving and enjoyed it. How about yourself?
Yeah, it was really good. Cooked a couple different things. We had some friends over, so they brought a couple of the things, so we didn't have to do all the cooking, which is always nice. Well, not too much of an eventful week. Should we get right into it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so I guess first things first, we had 3 mass shootings in about 7 days this week, which is a troubling trend. But as we get around to the holidays, it's even more sad. We've got finally a decision on Alaska elections. More craziness in Arizona, so we'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about some groups within Congress. I think we're going to talk about the Problem Solvers Caucus in the House, and we can't let a week pass without having Trump news. Trump had a very bad week last week, so we will delve into that. And I think for the most part, that's all we've got for this week, right, Cam?
Yeah. But there are definitely some interesting topics, so why don't we get started?
Yeah, so the first mass shooting we had was at the University of Virginia. I don't know that we had enough time to let all the details come out because it was quickly overshadowed. But basically, I think it was football players from the University of Virginia football team that were somewhat targeted. They were coming back from a show in Washington, kind of a field trip deal, and were gunned down, I believe, on the bus or as they were exiting the bus. And I think 3 deaths at this point. Do you know if there were any more?
What I saw was 3 deaths and two injuries. I think, and I say injuries, I believe those 2 are still hospitalized. So I think you've got it kind of right so far. I mean, it sounded like, yeah, exactly, returning back from a trip. And then I don't know if they were shot on the bus or as they were leaving. I'm not 100% sure on that either. But so far, 3 dead, two injured.
Yep, and then as we move to the beginning of the week, we have this nightclub shooting. Actually, that was last Saturday night, I believe. Nightclub shooting in Colorado, in Colorado Springs. Multiple people dead. Again, really unfortunate circumstances. The interesting takeaway from this, too, though, is there's been a lot of press given to kind of not just the shooter and the family, but the fact that he was subdued by unarmed people, one of them being a military vet, I believe an Army veteran, and was stopped and taken down before the police were able to get there. So good job on the nightclub attendants for being able to subdue the shooter and get that situation under control. But still, multiple people dead, multiple people injured. People are still in the hospital. And our heart goes out to them, especially around the holidays. I mean, it's bad any time of the year, but it can't be helped, And then moving a couple days after that, we have this shooting in a Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia. Again, it was like a manager that shot employees, several Walmart employees. So another very unfortunate thing that had to happen.
Yeah, I mean, on the Chesapeake, Virginia one, I'll just say I was, stationed a couple of different times in Virginia in that area. And while I wasn't living ever in Chesapeake, I'm familiar with Chesapeake because it is part of that greater Hampton Roads area that surrounds Norfolk and Virginia Beach. And I can't say for certain that I've ever been in that Walmart, but I know where it is. My understanding was this, I guess he was like a night shift supervisor / manager. He came into work and basically walked into a break room where they were all getting ready to start their evening shift and then just pulled out a handgun and started shooting people.
I don't know. There were several reports about, of course, this guy was vastly into conspiracy theories. I heard an interview with another Walmart employee who had worked with that individual and said, he was super concerned that the government was spying on him. And he would even put tape over the camera on his phone, because he didn't want the government seeing what he was doing. He was ultra paranoid and into all kinds of conspiracy theories. I know that doesn't help, but it just seems par for the course.
And you talk about this guy having problems. I mean, obviously he did. I heard from some Walmart employees, or didn't hear directly, but read, some articles, and they were talking about different Walmart employees or people that worked with this guy. And they said he had a reputation as being a hostile guy to work around. Like, as far as a leader goes, he just basically cultivated a hostile work environment. He was known to fly off the handle, which probably feeds into him being paranoid. I mean, I guess if this guy walked around all the time thinking the government was spying on him and there were cameras everywhere watching him, I mean, he probably was running around on edge all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make an excuse for the guy. I'm just saying this is kind of some stuff I read about him. The guy in Colorado at the nightclub, from what it sounds like, that guy's had quite a past as well. I mean, this is a guy who, apparently he'd been bullied a whole bunch. I mean, I was reading, he was kind of socially awkward. Again, I'm not defending this guy, just kind of what I read about his background. His mom had been in and out of trouble. I don't even think he was living with his mom, or I say living with. I don't think his mom finished raising him. I think his last few years of high school, he was raised by his grandma because his mom was, in so much trouble with the law. His father, who was basically, walked out on the guy, is a mixed martial arts guy / porn star who kind of dabbled in both professions, if you will, and basically has had nothing to do with this kid for many years now. And so,
yeah, there was a pretty troubling interview that somebody got a hold of his dad and got him in an interview, and he said some pretty awful things as well. So
yeah, I heard something about that too. So this guy's had, everything from an unstable background and family life to all kinds of other issues. I haven't heard as much about the guy at the University of Virginia, as far as kind of his background and such. But yeah, definitely some troubled individuals.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they've really proven much or said anything factually based about the guy in Virginia at the for the university shooting. But I do know that it's weird because, the three of the people that died, I believe all three of them were on the football team. This guy was formerly on the football team. And he had also had run-ins with the law. I mean, in one of the very first press conferences, they came out and said that, look, he was on our kind of potential problem list of students. So yeah, and as well as the guy in Colorado, right? He had been investigated for threats to blow up things. I think use a bomb or something like that.
Yeah, something to that effect.
So yeah, it's a troubling trend, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better. But I think President Biden had a statement this week. I didn't personally hear that. Did you hear what he had to say?
So I didn't hear the statement. I read about it. What I read, probably one of the big takeaways that's coming out of this is that he said he's going to push for an assault weapons ban in the lame duck session. Well, I say assault weapons. He said semi-automatic weapons, and then I've heard him say assault weapons. So I don't know what exactly. I think he means assault weapons is what he's trying to get at.
Yeah, I don't think semi-automatic weapons are going to go anywhere, and that's actually, I think that's a little extreme.
Considering semi-automatic weapons are used pretty commonly in this country for hunting, target shooting, all that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think if you know if you're somebody who knows enough or has used guns, semi-automatic weapons are pretty commonplace. I mean,
Well, I was going to say too, they're one of the most common waterfowl shotguns out there. I mean, duck hunters love them, goose hunters, like waterfowl hunters, love them. As far as the semi-automatic shotguns go, I could go on and on with that. But I think
even and you even talk about self-defense, like almost all of the readily available 45 handguns and 9 millimeters are semi-automatic as well.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And so in the rifles, I mean, semi-automatic rifles are gaining in a lot of popularity as far as, for the wild hog hunting down south where the hogs are decimating parts of land, predator hunting, etc. I mean, we could go on and on, but
Yeah, I think statistically looking, if we go back to during the Bush administration when the last assault weapons ban was expired, during the 10 years of that assault weapons ban, and you look at the statistics of mass shootings, it's like blatantly obvious that the increase has come since what was that? I don't remember, was it 2004?
2004 was when the assault weapons ban wasn't renewed. Fine and dandy. Guess what? In these 3 mass shootings this last week, there was only 2 of them were handguns. Only one guy, the guy in Colorado, brandished an AR-15, which isn't actually an assault rifle, but he brandished an AR-15 and a handgun.
Well,
I mean,
in 2003, you couldn't just go buy an AR-15.
Okay, but again, I that's another thing the federal government isn't exactly doing here, and Biden certainly hasn't done, is defining what is an assault rifle. And again, I mean, this just shows, right? We had these 3 shootings. I get it, tragic, but you automatically run to these ARs, these assault rifles, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I guess you have to look at this and say, like, where is the appetite in the country for this? I mean, in May, I read a Quinnipiac poll that had, now again, this was May, so this was a few months back, 50% of the country was for banning assault rifles. I mean, that's half the country, okay? That means, again, the other half isn't for it. We can talk constitutional rights, we could go on and on, but I will say this, I don't think this is a winning thing in the lame duck session for Biden. Yeah, I mean, he can tout it all he wants. If I were Democrats, again, I'm just throwing this out there, instead of going for something that's not going to pass, because we know there is no appetite in the House and Senate to ban ARs, assault rifles, whatever you want to call them. There isn't any real appetite there, enough at least to get it passed. What I would push for if I was a Democrat and I was Biden is I would push for the universal background check. They say 90% of the country wants it. Put that on record. Put that out for a vote. Go piecemeal this thing and try and push it through and say, look, we just had a vote, and here's the people that were for it. Here's the people that were for against it. That's the take I would actually approach if I was them, because he has no chance of getting assault rifles banned in the lame duck. That's not going to go anywhere. I mean, he can tout that he said it and he's trying, but it's not going to go anywhere. I think he's got a better move trying to piecemeal it with something like that has more of a universal appeal, if you will.
Yeah, and I agree that it's not going to probably get done in the lame duck session. I just don't. I think that, people, regardless of what side of the aisle you are on, people understand and are afraid of the power that the NRA wields. But to your first point, right? Like, look, Cameron, I don't know what the letters PT and PT Cruiser stand for, but if they start killing, like if PT Cruisers start killing kids in schools and people in nightclubs trying to have a good time, I'm against it. Get rid of the fucking PT Cruisers. I don't care what the letters are. It's just the fact of the matter. I mean,
well,
the fact of the matter is basically
AR stands for Armalite rifle. I mean, it doesn't even stand for AR like assault
yeah,
rifle.
I don't care what it stands for. I don't care. But the problem is they're killing too many people.
Yeah, this wasn't even used in the shooting. I mean, this was used in one shooting. I mean, this is a never-ending issue that the country is not behind, and it's not like if you want to have gun control, then work on piecemealing things that the country's going to get behind. But this idea that you're going to start confiscating guns and outlawing ARs and stuff, that's not going to happen. And I get it. People want to keep saying it, but there is no appetite for it. And it's not just like the House and Senate feel that way, like the country feels that way. ARs are very common. Hunters are using them more and more every year. Yeah, I get it. There's been some mass shootings that have happened because of these things. But guess what? Mass shootings can occur with a single shot shotgun. If you're quick enough on the draw, you can start loading up shotguns like that. It's not going to go anywhere. And I get it.
I understand.
It's a quick soundbite, but
the argument is not that the argument is not about it going anywhere or not. My point is that since the assault ban, the ban on assault rifles was lifted in 2004, gun deaths have increased drastically, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, and how many of those are
what I'm
because
saying,
of an AR rifle? I mean, I guess it
doesn't matter. The statistics show that since the ban has lifted, there is a sharp increase in the amount of gun deaths and mass shootings.
I got it.
So I get it in these particular shootings. But either way, we'll move on for this one. We do have elections to talk about and wrap up. We'll move on because we shouldn't even really be talking about the politics behind that one at this point anyway. I mean, it's at this point.
I would agree.
It's unfortunate that these people have had to lose their lives.
I would agree. I was going to say that at the end of the day, I feel for obviously people who have lost their lives in these shootings, and there are. As you mentioned earlier, this happened right before the holidays, so never a good time for these. So, yes, hearts go out to all those that have lost people in these shootings.
All right, on to Alaska. We finally have a result, or two results for that matter.
Well, so in Alaska, we do have two results. I think the results that everybody was kind of waiting for out of the state, one of the last to get the results out there. We have a senator and a representative up there now, and Lisa Murkowski wins in the Senate, and Mary Peltola wins in the House. Now, both of them were holding the seats. Peltola, albeit not very long, she just won in the special election this summer, but Murkowski's been a senator up there for years. And Phill, I got to say, at the end of the day, whether people like Lisa Murkowski or not, you've got to tip your hat to somebody like that for her tenacity. This is a woman who. I think it was the last time she was up for election, 2000, I guess it would have been 16. There was something where her name wasn't even on the ballot, and there was this statewide campaign to get her in as a write-in candidate, and she ends up winning the election as a write-in candidate. And oh, by the way, you've got to spell the name exactly right in Alaska to be win as a write-in. Her last name is Murkowski, not as easy to spell as Smith. So that was a few years back, and now fast forward to this election. This lady has been getting beat up for the last 2 or 3 years by Donald Trump nonstop. Donald Trump has called her the loser, the disaster from Alaska. He said she's worse than a Democrat. She survived all that, and here she is winning yet again, and she knocked off a Trump-backed candidate. Phill, is this woman like the Teflon woman?
She might be. Apparently what she is doing in Alaska is popular enough that she gets the vote. Especially with the system of ranked choice voting, which they have out there. I think it's good. I mean, she's kind of, I like Murkowski's approach in the Senate too. She's a Republican, she's a conservative, but she's willing to listen to what the people want, which I think we need more of.
I agree 100% with you, and she is definitely benefiting from ranked choice voting, and I think the voters in Alaska recognize that she is there for them, or she's at least trying her best to have their best interest at heart. So, and I mean, I think you can say something very similar about Mary Peltola. Here's a woman who comes into a seat that had been held by a Republican for 49 years, Don Young, when he passed away earlier this year. She wins a special election in the summer and then turns around, wins the seat back in the fall in a state that typically votes red. And she won it. Not only did she win it, she beat out Sarah Palin in both the special and the general election, who had been a governor up there and a one-time vice presidential candidate. And again, call it benefit of ranked choice voting or whatever you want, but Peltola, I think her, she ran an impressive campaign. She was, again, kind of like Murkowski saying she's going to put Alaska, she's running on Alaska and the fishing industry and family and, this, that, and the other. But I mean, honestly, hats off to both these women. They survived tough races and came out ahead.
Yeah, and then Peltola also it should be mentioned. Is an indigenous. Is your heritage is indigenous and indigenous to the state of Alaska, which I think is a lot of people in Alaska want that. They want to identify with that, even if you're not part of a tribal nation or indigenous and you live in Alaska. That's Alaska's identity. The people up there embrace that. They love the fact that they're part of this unique state. And I think that helped her over the edge too.
I was just going to say, I think
some of those kind of Alaska based views where it is about our, local industry and the things that are unique to our state.
Phill, I think that's a really good point. And I think, the fact that people like Murkowski and Peltola can really capture that. I mean, I've actually listened to kind of a roundtable discussion some months back with Lisa Murkowski, was one of them, along with some other politicians. And she was talking about the uniqueness just of getting out to vote in Alaska and how difficult it is to fly ballots around the state. And these are things that probably no other senators or representatives understand unless you represent the state of Alaska. And she's actually making it known about some of these different voter things, why they need to be on the books, because, hey, guess what? In places like Alaska, this still matters. I think that the case can be said for both these women. They have not forgotten, who it is that they represent. Honestly, I feel like there are more senators and representatives out there that can probably learn from these two. And, oh, by the way, I will just say this. Mary Peltola, the Democrat, was endorsed by Republican Lisa Murkowski this year. And Republican Lisa Murkowski in her Senate race was endorsed by the Democrat Mary Peltola. So I think that is interesting how these two women have no problem reaching across the aisle and trying to just flat out get things done.
Yeah, and I think one that's pretty unique because we don't see that pretty much anywhere else in the country. There may be a couple exceptions, but I think it worked to both their advantage. I think the appeal to what people really identify with and really want to do with their voting power in a state is definitely the right move.
Yeah, and Phill, you mentioned that ranked choice voting in Alaska. We've talked about this in a few episodes now, but it kind of excites me. It allows some of these more moderate candidates to get through, and I'm hoping we see some more states take that on board in the coming years.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't recall. I know we mentioned one state that's going to have it on a couple of ballots. I believe that was Nevada.
It is. You're exactly right, Phill. It was Nevada, and there was something, I don't know if strange is the right word, but something kind of different about the way they voted it in. Apparently they voted it in this fall, but they have to reaffirm it via vote in 2024. So I think the earliest Nevada can see it added to or put into their voting system is 2026, if I'm not mistaken. And then Maine does it also.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see ballot measures in other states. I just don't know, so I'd have to go back and look it up, because when we talked about it in Nevada a couple episodes ago, I only hit like the top 5 or 6 ballot issues that were around. But before we move on out of Alaska into the House as a whole, we're starting to get some data, especially from these elections, and I wanted to talk a little bit about just some of the data points that we're seeing, especially. And so, a lot of people talk about exit polls, and there's a lot of kind of controversial stuff about exit polls because the way the questions are worded, or are they really a good snapshot? And then also a lot of people who do exit polls, just the vote in person demographic. It's not the people who vote early. Aside from polling, as we get actual data from, the election, we're kind of seeing some interesting stuff, Cam. We saw that overall, the Republican vote was, and the turnout was less than it was in 2018, which is kind of, I would say, a little bit surprising, as close as some of these elections were. The overall turnout was less. The next one, too, is that while it was less overall, in the youngest demographic, kind of age group demographic, the 18 to 29-year-old group, there were more Republicans that turned out in 2022 than either 2018 or 2020. And then, I mentioned this to you earlier, but the independent statistics are really, really unique. So in the past two elections, independent voters went towards Republicans by about 11 points, and that has dropped by about 8 points in 2022. The independent vote went Democratic by 2 or 3 points. So pretty shocking. And then also,
very interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting, right? The other thing that's kind of, I think we all kind of thought this was going on, but there's still some interesting takeaways from it, is that the youth turnout was definitely not as high as it was in 2018, which kind of surprises me, don't you?
Yeah, I would have thought that the youth turnout would have been as high this year as it had ever been. So that is kind of an interesting statistic. Actually, I'll say this too. Hats off to you for crunching that data. You're probably not going to, blow your own horn here on the podcast, but Phill, you put a lot of work into crunching these numbers. So I'll just let our listeners know that. Thank you for crunching these numbers.
Yeah, definitely. I will say that it's, I mentioned to you that it's definitely not as easy to find some of this stuff and to put it together, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have some talking points, because it takes obviously, what are we, 3 weeks now, and we're just now kind of getting into Alaska. It takes a lot of time to count votes in certain places. It takes even more time for them to get that data and kind of publish it so that we know what we're actually looking at and see if there's any trends. The biggest takeaway from this whole thing is that every election is different. So just so we see a trend in 2022 or 2020 or 2018 really holds no weight on what we're going to see in the next election. So yeah. I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, Phill, something, I mean, you and I kind of talked about this earlier, but something I was going to add too. With the way that this split ticket voting was going this year, and by that I mean, in some of these states like Pennsylvania, where we saw the governor winning by like 14 points, Josh Shapiro, and then, in the Senate race, a Democrat only winning by 3, for example. I kind of wonder on some of these independents and other voters for that matter, maybe there was 20 different elections that they voted for on their ticket, and they voted Republican 11 times and Democrat 9 times. And so, yeah, technically they broke for Republicans, but they still mixed it up with plenty of Democrats. I would be willing to bet that's probably where some of this break, for the Republicans maybe came from with independents, because I think there was an awful lot of split ticket voting. I mean, there had to have been for the way some of these races turned out.
I would agree, and I think that's unique. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know how big split ticket voting has been in the past, or if it was kind of in decline there for a while, but we definitely saw it in multiple places. Probably more than half of the elections in states where they had multiple people on the ticket for different, for the House and the Senate and the governorship. We saw it in just about every single one of those states, I would say.
Yeah, definitely the competitive ones, at least. Like you said, Pennsylvania, Nevada.
Georgia was huge.
Yeah, Georgia was another one. I think New Hampshire to an extent. So, I mean, we could go on and on. But actually, we talked about this last week, but that's refreshing in my opinion. And I think you would agree with me to see people actually learning about their candidates instead of just voting, checking off somebody with a D or an R next to their name.
Absolutely. Moving on to the House. Cam, you wanted to tell us a little bit about this Problem Solvers Caucus?
Yeah, well, specifically, I kind of wanted to tie it all into this moderates kind of trying to flex their muscles, if you will. So there is this whole ongoing saga about Kevin McCarthy in the House trying to gain the speakership, and there are a number of moderate Republicans who are stepping up saying, look, if you want this and you want support from Republicans, you can't just listen to the loud faction on the far right, the Freedom Caucus, if you will. How about us? How about the moderate Republicans? How about the Main Street Caucus? How about the Problem Solvers Caucus, which I'll kind of segue to them in a second here. But I saw an interview this past week with Representative Don Bacon out of Nebraska. He's a moderate Republican, and he had a really interesting take when he was in that interview. He said, look, He said, the Freedom Caucus is all of about 39 members. This Main Street center right caucus of Republicans is 89. We have a lot more in this middle right now. It's just we're just not that loud and vocal because we're rolling our sleeves up and just trying to get things done. And so they're saying, hey, look, you know what? This might be an opportunity for us to get in here and actually make our mark. And they're kind of citing how they saw Manchin and Sinema kind of doing something similar in the Senate. And they want a piece of that action to try and get their more centrist things moving forward. And it's not just Republicans. It's the Democrats also. And I did want to take a minute to talk about this Problem Solvers Caucus. I think this is a great caucus that's in the House. And I think it's great. And I also think it's one of those caucuses that most people don't know anything about. What it is it's an equal number of Republicans and Democrats who have basically committed to working together. And they are on this Problem Solvers Caucus. I think they're 56 right now, or 58, somewhere in that number, just under 60. But again, it's split equally between the two parties. And it's co-chaired by Republican Brian Fitzpatrick and Democrat Josh Gottheimer out of Fitzpatrick being out of Pennsylvania, Gottheimer out of New Jersey. And these two gentlemen, I actually listened to an interview with them here earlier this week. The interview was, kind of an older one, but really refreshing to hear them talk. I mean, they are not getting in the mud on anything. And both of them said, look, the far right and far left are the ones that we always hear about. They're the ones that are getting the sound bites. They're the ones that are getting social media attention. But what are they getting done? And what these guys and gals on this Problem Solvers Caucus have committed to doing is working together. And they've got some rules. I mean, their rules are basically this. They're going to sit and work on issues as long as it takes. But at the end of the day, if they can get 3/4 of their caucus to agree on something, then they are going to stand as a unified front and vote for it. They've also agreed to have civil discussion. They have agreed in their caucus that it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you sit on. If it's a good idea, they want to work with it and get behind it. They are committed to moving things forward. The infrastructure bills that we talked about earlier this year, a lot of that stuff that's in those bills started with the Problem Solver Caucus, while those on the far left and right wanted to just have their, cake and eat it too. Like these guys were saying, look, give me something here. And the only way to get something through an infrastructure or some of these other issues they're tackling is for us to come together and both sides to give a little bit. And I
think that's.
I was just going to say, Phil, they're also working police reform. They're trying to work many other issues. And they've said this, look, some of the most sensitive hot button issues that are out there in the country that no one wants to tackle or talk about, we'll do it. We'll roll up our sleeves and see what we can get done. And I think it's really refreshing listening to what these people are trying to put forward. And I'll also say this, if you look at the membership on this Problem Solvers Caucus, most of these are members that are not household names at all. They're just everyday, House members that are trying to get things done. And so I guess, they're quietly behind the scenes doing it. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Phil.
It's all right. No, I just want to make the point that I think this is what most Americans want and most people who vote want, is that they just want progress. Like, just go there and get stuff done. I mean, we don't need fake investigations into dumb shit that shouldn't even be being investigated by a government body anyway. We have investigatory institutions for that, right? We don't need a bunch of noise about all the outside, like you said, the radical far away from the center, and this is good. I mean, this is good for the country. It's good for the politics in general is people coming together and working together, especially if they're going to produce results and get things done.
I would and Phil, I would encourage our listeners, if you haven't done it, to just look up that Problem Solvers Caucus. And you know what? Some of the other moderate caucuses, whether it be the Main Street Republicans or the Blue Dog Democrats, I would encourage our listeners to look all those up and actually read up on these House members that are in there from both sides of the aisle, because I think these people need a lot of credit. Right? Take the D's and R's off their name. Just the fact that they are actually behind the scenes getting things done, I think they deserve a lot of credit. And I honestly wish they got championed a lot more than they are. So you know what? If I got a few minutes on the podcast to champion them, I'll certainly do that. And I'm glad to have taken a few minutes to do just that.
All right. Well, moving on Trump had a really bad week this week, Cam. We could probably talk for an hour about this. I'm not going to do it. But it kind of started. We started out the week with the Supreme Court smacking him down, saying no, your tax returns are going to the House Ways and Means Committee. And then, of course, he threw a temper tantrum. He came out ironically saying that SCOTUS is acting as a political body, which I say ironically because, this is one of those have his cake and eat it too kind of complaints when it comes to the Supreme Court.
Well, three of those members, by the way, on the court he put there.
I know, but it's also like you can't be extremely happy with the Supreme Court when they make a decision that you do like, and the other side, there's a ton of irony there because, not only did he put three of the members there, but that sounded like the Democrats 6 months ago, right?
Well,
all up in arms because SCOTUS is being a political body, right?
Well, Phil, I was also going to say, I know Trump's been upset at the Supreme Court, but, and he did put three members on that court, but aside from the whole Roe v. Wade thing, have you kind of noticed that these people that he's put on the court quite often, they don't rule in his favor?
Yeah, no, quite often they don't. I don't think he's gotten a single one of his cases. I think there actually was one. I think there was one outlier, but every other case that he's forced to go all the way to the Supreme Court has gotten smacked down. Some of the times it wasn't even going to the whole court. It was just the initial justice who controls looking at that particular issue or that particular area, just smacked it down and said, no, this isn't worth the court's time.
Recently, that was Clarence Thomas, one of the most conservative members of that, threw it back in his face.
Yeah, absolutely. I think.
Hey Phil, I'm sorry. I was gonna ask you on this one from this past week, and you may not have this number in front of you, but on this Trump tax return thing, was that a 9-0 unanimous decision, or do you not have the numbers in front of you?
No, I don't even think we got that far. Again, I think this one, I do not quote me on this. I could be terribly wrong about this, but I think this one went to Justice Roberts, and then Justice Roberts kind of writes his opinion, and then it gets looked at by the rest of the court members, but they don't actually hold a vote or take it up procedurally. They just basically say okay, Justice Roberts, we all agree with what you have to say, and then it goes away. So that's a lot of those issues that people try and fast track directly to the Supreme Court. That's how they get looked at. They don't necessarily, the court is not going to put on their robes and go to work just to rule on this case, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and apparently Justice Roberts, or whomever it was, didn't feel this was worth the court's time, and the rest of the members felt the same way because it was quickly tossed, and so Trump dealt with that, and then Tuesday night, he held a little dinner party at his house where he has Kanye West over, but not just Kanye West.
Real quick, before we get into that, I got a couple other things, right? Because Tuesday was the latest news. Now, granted, it's Saturday, but nothing really happened over Thanksgiving. But before that, his lawyers are getting completely decimated in these cases.
Again, look at his lawyer. I mean, seriously, these are not really the A squad anymore. I mean, who's he got to represent him? That's kind of the thing with this. He doesn't exactly probably have the A team out there representing him.
Yeah, well, it's like Elena Haba. He does actually have some good judges from some of the commentary that I've seen, but the ones who are out and about right now, making a voice out there, are Elena Haba, and then there's this guy Trusty. I believe it's Jim Trusty. And they got absolutely decimated this week in the case that's with the Department of Justice about the Mar-a-Lago classified documents. They kind of went to plead their case, and I got a couple quotes here that just kind of show you how bad the conduct is, and it might even result in more consequences for those. I mean, one quote was the judge saying, "I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the government if someone has intermingled classified documents and all kinds of other personal property." He went on to say, do you think it's rare that the target of a warrant thinks the government is overreaching? I mean, it's just that's like the best legal rhetorical question on the planet from this, from this special prosecutor. And then he also said, if you can't establish that it was unlawful, then what are you even doing here? Which was prompted by the lack of quality evidence or argument that they brought even to the hearing. With that being said, it looks more and more like this special prosecutor. I listened to an interview with a lawyer that had worked with him the other day, and she said this guy is, no joke, he means business. He would not have been appointed to this position if the Justice Department didn't think he was going to, run the sword through, and nor would he would have taken the case and accepted the appointment if he didn't have intentions of actually getting something done. So like I said, Trump's week went from bad to worse as the days went on. But go on Tuesday night's dinner party.
Yeah, please. This is what I've been waiting for. All right, so he has a dinner party. He decides to have Kanye West over on Tuesday night, and Kanye West decides to bring some friends. And one of those friends was Nick Fuentes, who is a white supremacist, national, whatever. I mean, we could go on and on with this guy's background. But long story short, brings him over along with 2 or 3 other people. They all come over to have dinner with Donald Trump. And apparently during this dinner, at some point, Kanye West breaks into the conversation by saying, you know what, I'm about to announce my candidacy for 2024 as president. And Mr. Trump, I'd like you to be my running mate. At which point, apparently, Trump gets irate with him, starts yelling at him, telling him, you have no shot. Why are you wasting your time? How dare you ask me to be vice president? I'm running and I'm going to win. It just goes all downhill from there. Then apparently Donald Trump starts taking cheap shots at Kanye West's, former wife, Kim Kardashian. I mean, it just goes downhill from there. Well, then word leaks out about who came to this dinner party. And people are finding out Nick Fuentes was there, who's just, who again has said some highly, highly controversial things about, Jews, and he's a Holocaust denier and all these kind of things. Now, Donald Trump's turning around saying, well, I didn't even know who this man was. He just showed up with Kanye West. But now Donald Trump's been taking heat from that. Number of Democrats have come out and blasted him for having these people over. Also, people from his own party. I will just read this quick. This is from Chris Christie, and he says, and I quote, "This is just another example of an awful lack of judgment from Donald Trump, which combined with his past poor judgments make him an untenable general election candidate for the Republican Party in 2024. Also, David Friedman, who was Trump's ambassador to Israel, tweeted disapproval of the meeting with both Fuentes and Yee and said, even a social visit from an anti-Semite like Kanye West and human scum like Nick Fuentes is unacceptable. I urge you to throw these bums out, disavow them, and relegate them to the dustbin of history where they belong." End quote.
Yeah. Just so we don't disenfranchise our younger listeners, I believe he's referred to as Ye.
I'm sorry. Yes. Whatever. Yes. Yee, whatever he's calling himself. He's trending. Nick Fuentes and Donald Trump are trending on this, and not in a good way. And by the way, those 2 quotes I just read are from members of his own party. So
it doesn't surprise me. I mean, this Nick Fuentes guy, I mean, he's pretty controversial. He's trying to be out there as a influencer, a young conservative influencer, but he's an open white nationalist, white supremacist. I mean, he was participated in Charlottesville.
He's been in a number of rallies, number of white supremacist rallies, and he's trying to be a conservative influencer. I'm going to just go ahead and say he's trying to be like some far right conservative influencer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so he's off the chain.
Yeah, the other thing that we did get news revolving around Trump this week is that and this goes back to the Supreme Court too. So it looks like Lindsey Graham was down trying to promote Herschel Walker and campaign with him a little bit this week. Turns out that was just a side a side project while he was in Georgia, because he was in fact testifying with the Fonnie Willis case down there for election meddling. So he did give testimony. Again, he had tried to overturn this and said basically his phone calls and involvement with the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and stuff was part of his duties as a congressman. So he shouldn't have to testify because he's allowed to do stuff like that as part of his duties. The Supreme Court had shot that down a couple months ago, so he was down there in Georgia giving testimony, and in his spare time decided to go meet and rally with Herschel Walker. It's also looking now like Pence is going to be forced to testify to Big Justice. And there are reports out there that Michael Flynn may have already given testimony as well. So, things are certainly closing in on the former president. Will we get a result? I don't know, but it's not looking good. Every piece of news we get is generally bad for him. Wouldn't you say?
Even a dinner party that he tries to have. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's all. I mean, this is like our weekly segment. There's always something with Donald Trump on this, but I mean, yeah, you touched on the Lindsey Graham. I mean, it just kind of keeps climbing and climbing. Again, as I always say, we'll see how this turns out going forward. But I had one other area that I wanted to touch on, Phil, if you're done with Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's all I got.
I wanted to bring up this Arizona lawsuit with Carrie Lake. I don't know if our listeners are aware, but Carrie Lake has now, and again, when I say Carrie Lake, she is the defeated Arizona gubernatorial candidate. She's trying to sue Maricopa County, Arizona election officials over what she says are fraudulent claims out there. Does this surprise you at all, Phil? Are you shocked by her grandstanding on this?
I am, and the only reason I am is because she's really the only one who is doing this. Everybody else that kind of ran on the big lie and was supported by Trump and all those things, everybody else conceded and went on. I don't know if this is the same lawsuit or if it's just kind of in tandem, but the failed candidate for attorney general in Arizona is also filing a lawsuit. It just goes on and on. Maybe she was so overcome by her visit to Mar-a-Lago last week that she she decided she was going to hold with this and even go as far as to file a lawsuit. But who knows,
Well, who's not paying any attention to these lawsuits and any of this grandstanding is Arizona's current governor. Governor Ducey, Republican, has come out and said that he's excited to start the turnover with Governor-elect Hobbs, and he wishes her all the best, and his entire team is standing by to make it a smooth, peaceful transition of power, and he's ready to get her election or her group or her time as governor off on the right foot. So apparently the governor of Arizona is not hearing any of that because he's moving on.
Yeah. So with that being said, I mean, drama in Arizona is overwhelmingly just not that surprising to me.
No, me either. So, I mean, you know what? This is not probably the last we have heard of Carrie Lake and lawsuits here, but I just want to throw that one out there quick, Phil, before you kind of wrap things up.
Well, I appreciate it. As it was a slow week, partially because of the holiday and partially just because, things are winding down with the election and all that stuff. We have pretty much covered all we've got to cover this week. Parting shots, Kim, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, before I start my parting shot, though, I just want to say log on to our website, pocketpolitics.co, and you can
link to all of our social medias from the website, so the Contact Us page.
Yep, you definitely can do that. So get on there, jump on our social media, send us an email, just like we say every week. And our email again, cameronandphil@gmail.com. So again, jump on there. like us, follow us on all our social media, etc. So, all right, with that out of the way, my parting shot this week, I want to talk about the wild turkey. And in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I thought this was an appropriate topic. So I know that myself, along with probably many of our listeners, and maybe even you as well, Phill, have heard for many years how Ben Franklin supposedly lobbied to have the wild turkey as our national bird instead of the eagle. And there's even this story out there that there was this vote amongst the founding fathers and that the wild turkey lost by only like one vote. Well, it turns out none of that is true. In fact, it's all a myth. What Ben Franklin did say was that some years after this whole symbol had been created, he ends up writing a letter to his daughter. And in this letter, he talks about how the eagle symbol didn't maybe turn out all that great, at least how it looked in the drawing. In fact, he said at one point it sort of looks like a turkey. And then he goes on to say, well, the eagle maybe isn't this most notable bird or noble bird that we talk about. And it's kind of lazy, isn't even noble enough to do its own fishing. And it's more of a scavenger. And he kind of goes on. And then he says, but we talk about the turkey, and that is kind of a grand symbol of America. And, and he goes on to kind of prop up the turkey a little bit. He said, even though it's kind of a big, silly, goofy bird. And that was all he said. And so now, as historians look at this letter, many of them say Ben Franklin, who was known to have a humorous side, may not have even been serious when he wrote this letter to his daughter. It may have all been some kind of attempt at some humor that his daughter and him laughed at when they were together at one point. So I thought it was interesting this week to try and clear up some of this myth behind the wild turkey and how, according to legend, it almost became our national bird. And in reality, none of that was true. The eagle had it all the way. So with that being said, Phill, over to you.
All right. Well, we're, almost a week in, and the World Cup is no shortage. It's providing no shortage of drama. Some people may know, but this is the Winter World Cup, right? This is I think the first one that's ever happened during the winter months. They have to do that because it's in the desert in the Middle East, in Qatar. And, it's just, we've had craziness in the sports. We've had craziness in the stuff that's going on out or surrounding the sports. I mean, it is just nuts all over the place. We started off with the hosting team, the nation of Qatar. They lose the opening game. Not really that big of a surprise because nobody knows anything about them, but they lost their second game as well, making them the first World Cup host to basically be eliminated that fast. And so they are completely done, which is unfortunate because the way the tournament is set up, they still have to go play another game whether they want to or not, knowing that they've all been disqualified completely. The next thing is there's massive protests from fans, from the soccer teams that are playing. I mean, Germany came out, played their first game, and when they posed for their team picture on the field before the game started, they all held their hands over their mouths, basically protesting, FIFA telling them what they could and couldn't do, as far as wearing patches on their jerseys, which is a pretty common thing in the sport. I mean, just it's one thing after another. I mean, there was a lady arrested for protesting the protests going on in Iran right now. There's been a lot of stuff where people are speaking out about that. People are upset because there's no beer allowed, right? So all these soccer fans from around the world that want to enjoy a beverage while they're watching their game, that is banned. There's just all kinds of drama. And then we've got upsets. So a huge upset. Saudi Arabia beats Argentina in the first couple of days. Germany got taken down by Japan, which was a pretty big surprise. I'm sure there will be more to come, but most importantly, as far as the actual games go, USA is holding on. We tied England yesterday. It was epic. And so stay tuned for that and root on Team USA. That's all I got, Cam.
All right, well, it's been another great episode here, Phill. So, with all of this being said, thank you so much to all of our listeners again for listening to us. And anything else here, Phill, before we sign off?
And that's all I got.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time.
All right, bye.